February isn't usually seen as a month for horror, but to be fair, games have never really followed the same release patterns as movies. For movies, there's always a push to make October a big part of the studio's horror calendar. 2023, for example, the legacy sequel to The Exorcist unfortunately hit theaters, along with other new horror movies like the Five Nights at Freddy's adaptation. Games are a different animal. One of the premier franchise returns, one tailor-made for a spooky October run, got pushed back to January, as the month was already too full. Not by horror, mind you. While there were horror games that came out in October of 2023, they were overshadowed by the likes of Super Mario Wonder and Batman Arkham Trilogy on the Switch, Sonic Superstars, a new Assassin's Creed game, and mega-hit sequel Spider-Man 2. Alan Wake 2 is a great title to launch, but it hardly made the month a horror month in game releases. Many of the best horror games of that year came out in January with the Dead Space remake, March with the Resident Evil 4 remake, in June with Amnesia the Bunker. Hey, look at that, a non-remake. This has been happening for years though, over 40 in fact, which works great for our purposes as Haunted House was released in February of 1982. While there were other fun or interesting titles that year, Haunted House has a special place and interesting legacy that makes it arguably the most important game of the year, at least in the horror realm. It was developed and published by Atari for the 2600 while being programmed by James Anderson. Anderson was a graduate of the University of Colorado at Boulder and was a software engineer for a couple companies. While I can't find much else he worked on, he deserves a shout out here. As quaint as it looks today, it had challenges in its design as it had to be drawn and loaded in rather than something like Pitfall, which was done using code. It also has the distinction of being one of the first video games to have a player model, here a pair of eyes that controls the screen movement. The story in these games, or what we would refer to as the narrative, wasn't exactly common or easy to do for that matter. Haunted House has the player, or his eyeballs anyway, attempting to retrieve the pieces of an old urn. That's actually a bit reductive as there's quite a lot of replay value within this cart. The game instructions give you quite the story of how Zachary Graves lived in a mansion in Spirit Bay until his death, where the house was locked up. It sets the player's expectations with 4 floors and 24 rooms, and you may even need a key to get through it all. Graves had a scepter that was said he used to ward spirits off that may still be in there, and that urn was broken into pieces during a huge earthquake in 1890. I'd also like to note that this is the first game I was able to get my own capture footage for. This also helps us into another aside, and that's the fact that I'm going to have to get into these games however I can. I respect the hell out of all the YouTubers that use original hardware or even the original cart on a clone system, but I just want to get the word out on these games. For Haunted House, I'm using the recently released Atari 50th Anniversary Celebration disc because look at it. With all the problems in the world of video game preservation, we need a heck of a lot more compilations like these from other companies. Bonus points for making it a physical release so that it can be available for future generations too. On this disc, we can look at the history of the company, let alone the game, and it's glorious. Artwork, remakes, and even videos show up in here. Anyway, the game can be played with 9 different modes depending on the length and difficulty the player wants. In the original release cartridge-based version, you use the game select switch on the console to select your difficulty level. On this version, you can just select in the options, but in both, you need to reset the game to have the new selection take hold. Now back then, you had to hopefully keep the instruction manual, or you'd have no way of knowing which of the 9 settings affected what aspects of the game. It starts at 1 and goes to 9 with a natural progression of difficulty tweaks. 1 is basically to get your feet wet on the layout and purpose of the game. With 9 lives, it's essentially impossible to lose on this mode. You can actually see everything and can easily get to your goal and out within minutes. Further difficulties add locked doors, more enemies that include spiders and bats to contend with, along with our ghost friend. It can also eliminate the light source so that you can't see the walls unless you strike a match or from a lightning bolt outside. It really does extend that coveted video game replay value system and allows you to understand, get good, and eventually master the product. You can make the key random, you can make the enemies faster and more aggressive, and you can even make it to where the ghost isn't phased by the scepter, making him even scarier. You win the game by getting all the pieces of the urn and leaving the house. You are awarded points based on how many matches were lit and how many lives you lost. The disc also has a remake on it, and while I'm certain to talk about that in the releases of 2022, it's worth a shout out here. While it's a simple game, something that works as a remake of a very simple game, the graphics have been updated significantly and it has different settings to choose from. It starts with a school, but you can unlock a cabin, a big tower, and finally a giant mansion to explore. It's a really cool bonus thrown in and was one of the games chosen as a remake inclusion for a reason. While it's fun, I prefer the quaint graphical workarounds of the original like the match effect and lighting. The game is still fun and a great companion piece to play with its 40-year-old sibling. Now, the art on this original game cover may actually be more legendary than the game itself and was almost denied from the start because the booby eyes. These were games marketed to kids after all. Well, most of them were anyway. The art was done by Steve Hendriks and he did both the cover art and everything inside the instruction manual. Hendriks did some other great ones like Defender and Warlords and was even a massive team player. It was reported that sometimes he would sit down with the game designers to talk about the actual game. John Enright, Susan Jekyll, and Cliff Spawn, among many others, made this time in gaming just special. Atari cover art is, well, art in and of itself. There are in fact books dedicated to the subject, and they are hard to get mad at with how good they look. I say mad because 90% of them gameplay-wise look absolutely nothing like the box that screamed at parents and kids alike to make them want to buy them. Why else is this game so special? I knew this one would win out for 1982 before I even started the project, but if I'm being honest, things like The Alien and Transylvania I find more fascinating. They are, in many ways, more complex than Haunted House. Different systems aside, but our entry for today was a huge seller and is often credited as possibly the first survival horror game. I don't love that distinction here, but I'm also not going to claim to be the end-all, be-all authority on what survival horror is. For me though, survival horror starts with Alone in the Dark from 1992 and was refined with Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and the various clones that boomed out of that period. Let's take a look at it through the lens of what we traditionally see as survival horror to see what they're referring to. The game has a limited inventory system. While Alone in the Dark allowed you to take everything and anything you wanted with you, Resident Evil limited that to 8 or 6 squares of inventory depending on the character you chose. They also included an item box to drop and swap things into, as there were going to be a whole lot of items you would need to use, but not all at the same time. This would change for Resident Evil 0 when it decided to just drop your crap anywhere, like my kids when they come home from school. Haunted House does a little of both here, as you can only hold on to the key, the urn pieces, or the scepter at any given time with your very limited storage space, and just kind of leave the other item on the floor until you need it when you walk over them. Limited ammunition or supplies are also a staple of the survival horror genre, and yeah, that's here too in the sense that there's only one weapon and there is no ammo. You can't destroy the spiders or bats, but you can use the scepter to ward off the ghost, at least for a time. This idea has been used in horror games where you can't fight back and can only run and hide, and can even be seen in monsters you can defeat for a time but that eventually come back for the player, like some of the tyrants in Resident Evil games, or even the creature lurking in the bunker in 2023's stellar release. Even the third-person view can be looked at as a forebearer to the subgenre, but in all honesty, all of these aspects of the game can be chalked up to the limitations of the hardware and the gaming landscape as a whole. Some things from the past can look like a precursor to something modern, but that can also be us molding it to what we want, rather than something planned by the original creators. Whether or not you believe this to be one of the first survival horror games, it's still a unique entry that added a lot on the road to where we're going in horror gaming. Adventure gave us the first Easter egg, and while Haunted House doesn't have anything as concrete as that written into the history books, it's a journey well worth taking, and through word of mouth, time, the artwork, the gameplay, or a little bit of everything mixed together, has stayed in our zeitgeist. It was released on a few compilations like Atari 80-in-1, Atari Anthology, Atari Greatest Hits, every single Atari Flashback Plug and Play, and the Atari Flashback Classic series. It's never really gone away and won't anytime soon. Its legacy also includes a remake for the Wii and other systems in 2010, and a completely different entry in 2014 with a roguelike entry that came out in late 2023, as is one of the popular styles of our time. What were your experiences with Haunted House? Any of them, really. 1982 was a weird year for gaming. It had plenty of hits and important games or systems to be sure, but it also led into the video game crash that could have stopped its growth as an industry for good. Even with that crash though, 1983 we will see nearly double the amount of horror games put out, and while it didn't have quite the same releases in terms of importance, the legacy of some of them are interesting in multiple ways. See in 1983.